Hey everybody, welcome to this small announcement video in Planet Coaster. What you're looking at the moment is completely unedited footage of the game. I didn't put this together with any different clips whatsoever. This is just a roller coaster going on for pretty much forever without losing any speed. And if you don't already have an idea what I'm talking about, basically today a couple of cheats are going to be revealed in the game, and you'll see some of it in the live stream tonight at the Planet Coaster channel as well. And the cheat that I got allows you to turn off friction. So this is basically a little infinity symbol that's just gonna loop around forever until it runs out of track, but I made sure to at least give it quite a bit of track that this could at this point almost be an infinite loop. Whatever the case, I really just wanted to showcase this cheat, show you how you can get it and what it does in game. Alright, now I may have lied because this cheat actually consists of two different cheats. Now the first one, I've been told, reduces the friction of coasters to 30% their original value, but I've also been told that it reduces to 50% of their value, and I've also been told that the developers are leaving this up to figure out. So I'm not exactly sure what it is. I tried to figure it out later in this video, but you'll see that. But basically, it slows down the friction and makes sure that your coasters actually speed up quite a bit. And all you have to do to activate this cheat, and this is actually quite intuitive when it comes to theme park simulation games, is click on a guest and rename them. So for this cheat to slow down the friction, we're going to rename a guest James Taylor, who happens to be senior designer on Planet Coaster, I believe, and that should basically reduce the friction to a much lower value. But the second cheat is, of course, the very interesting one. And this cheat allows you to reduce the friction to pretty much exactly zero, and coasters can, as far as I know and as far as I've tested, just keep their original speed forever, and they will never slow down unless you break them or have the track going up. And what you have to rename a guest for this cheat is Andy Fletcher, who happens to be the lead designer of Planet Coaster. So yeah, we've got two designer guys being the rename cheats that we have in game, to either make the friction lower or just get rid of the friction altogether. And that's basically how the cheat works. Now, some more things that you really want to keep in mind. I've been told some other things, and I tried to experiment as many times as I could with these cheats. These cheats apply to the entire map. So when you rename a guest Andy Fletcher, it's gonna turn down the friction to zero for the entire map, and when you rename a guest James Taylor, same happens but for low friction. And you can switch between the two, but I haven't been able to find a way to get back to regular friction, except if you reload the park file, because every time I reloaded the park, it pretty much resets the friction to in-game levels, so I suppose that is the way to just reset the cheats in general. But yeah, that's basically my assumption. Important things to keep in mind is that you can't set these cheats for specific coasters. You can do it to any guest at any part in the map. It doesn't really matter whether they're standing in the queue of a specific coaster or whether they left the park. In fact, the guest can leave the park and the cheat will still be active. But what you do want to keep in mind is that the cheat disappears when you reload the park save. So yeah, let's dig into a bit more sciencey stuff when it comes to the cheats, because I'm very sure that you want to see how this cheat works and how much it affects the coasters. So what I put together for a little bit are three different versions of the same track, but each with different friction, and we'll see how that works out. Alright, so here the top part is with no cheats, the second is James Taylor, and the last is Andy Fletcher with no friction whatsoever. And we can very clearly tell that Andy Fletcher is by far the fastest. The top one is losing speed pretty quickly. James Taylor is still kind of catching up, but they're both just crashing at the end. And the no cheats one just stalls because it doesn't have any speed left. So yeah, that's pretty much how it looks and how much they slow down relative to each other. But I also want to have a quick look in game and see how this really affects your coasters. So at the moment I've got both of the cheats turned off, and we have a simple El Loco and the Koali Beach Ku'ula wooden coaster over here. Now this is pretty much the wooden coaster as it's supposed to be, with regular friction, not too fast. Although I did make a couple of changes. I put a few trim brakes in the middle of the ride, and while it's not too big of an issue over here, it's definitely very slowly creeping over that hill, and on the rest of the layout it's quite simply not gonna make it. The El Loco though pretty much works as it's supposed to be. including a pretty good speed, so I'm pretty happy with that. But I just kind of want to see how the cheats are gonna actually change all of this. So we have our first guests in the park here, and let me just rename this first poor person to James Taylor. And hopefully by now the wooden coaster should have a pretty much perfect speed. At least that's what I've been going for. So basically what I've been doing is something that's very reminiscent of something that used to be done quite a bit in the Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 days, and I reckon that quite a few viewers or players of this game might as well remember that. Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 used to have a lower friction option, and this was very commonly used by turning it on and using brakes in order to control the speed of your coaster a little bit. If it isn't quite making it through a hill or an inversion, or if you wanted it to just be a little bit faster, you could just lower the friction and put some brakes in there to perfectly manage the speed, and that's something that I wanted to do with the wooden coaster here. It's just a tiny bit faster this way than it is in Koala Beach without the cheat, and I kind of liked just taking the idea of turning down the friction a little bit and controlling the speed to what I exactly wanted to have using the trim brakes. So that's something I just kind of did over here, and this is a way in which the idea can turn into a disaster, because this ride is just going way too fast at this point and would snap your neck pretty badly, especially toward the end over there. So yeah, this can definitely also break your coasters quite a bit. It turns much worse if you rename somebody into Andy Fletcher. No offense, but it's a complete disaster. The wooden coaster is still somewhat okay, even though it does have these trim brakes along the way. Going down to 0 friction means that without any brakes your coaster is never going to slow down whatsoever. Unless it goes up, of course. There is still the effect of gravity, so that's something that you might notice. But you can already notice that it's quite a lot faster without the friction whatsoever here. And even with the trim brakes, it's still really fast over there. But this coaster at this point is just insane and not something that I would really recommend riding at this point. Not that you realistically could, but you can definitely see it going a little bit ridiculous here. So yeah, watch out with these cheats. Unless you have some really good control using brakes or something, you probably don't want to use these cheats for realistic purposes. I do think that the James Taylor cheat is quite handy for doing stuff like this. Like, say you have a coaster and you really just wanted to manage the speed to what's realistic or what you really wanted to have. You can use the trim brakes to actually get like a more desired speed and not completely have to rely on the in-game gravity and friction, so that's pretty awesome. Although that of course only works for single coasters on a map, since the friction options go for all coasters, or you're just gonna have to control the speed of all your coasters. But of course, and this is where I think the main potential lies, even if this is not my typical thing that I do, this cheat is just really amazing if you want to go peep bowling or torture your guests in all kinds of ways, or just make ridiculous rides. For instance, I built this big log flume, and it's pretty interesting what happens if you start testing it, because I've basically tested the cheat with all tracked rides. Unfortunately, it didn't work with real rides, or I guess just the train. It also doesn't work with go-karts. They don't start going ridiculously fast when they go downhill. But it does work with the water rides, so it works with the rapids ride, but it also works with the log flume, so as soon as it kind of hits the water, it's just going to keep on going, and going to be launched pretty fast out of that. So yeah, there's definitely some very interesting stuff that you can do with that. Even if you add a lift hill after this, it's just going to keep on flying up, and it's absolutely ridiculous. There's some pretty fun stuff that you could do with that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't want to give people too many ideas, so I'm going to call it a day here. I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank the guys at Frontier so much for giving me these cheats and allowing me to show these cheats before anybody else sees them, and kind of give a quick showcase of what these cheats do. And of course, have fun playing with these cheats, have fun playing the game, and I hope to see you guys all next time.